The galaxy was quiet, almost too quiet. Stars burned in silence, ancient and cold, while a single white vessel drifted through the endless dark. It was a human hospital ship, a ship of mercy, not war. Its great body shone with markings of peace, red crosses painted across its hull, glowing so no one could mistake its purpose. Inside the vessel there was life. Doctors walked quickly but calmly through bright corridors, carrying trays of medicine. Nurses leaned over beds, checking wounded soldiers who whispered with tired voices. Children clung to their mothers, frightened but safe for the moment. The air smelled of metal and disinfectant, but it carried a feeling of hope. The war outside had been brutal, yet here at least people could still heal. But hope can be fragile. And in space, fragile things are easily broken. Far beyond the glowing ship, hidden in the shadows of drifting asteroids, dark shapes moved. Alien warships, sleek, sharp, and cold, waited like predators. Their engines hummed quietly, their weapons charged but silent. They had been tracking the human vessel for hours, waiting for the right moment. On the command bridge of the lead alien ship, a captain stood tall, his eyes narrow, his voice like ice. "The humans call this a sanctuary," he said to his officers. "But in war, there are no sanctuaries." The order was simple. Fire. The universe erupted. Bolts of plasma streaked across the blackness, bright as falling stars. They slammed into the hospital ship's side with terrible force. The sound of explosions tore through the silence. Metal ripped apart. Fire rushed down corridors. Inside the ship, peace shattered in an instant. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered and died. Doctors dropped their tools as the floor shook beneath them. Mothers pulled their children close, shielding them from falling debris. A nurse screamed for help as a fire burst across the ceiling above her. On the bridge, Captain Elena Ward gripped the railing, her knuckles white. Her voice trembled but stayed strong. "All hands, emergency response. Seal off burning decks. Protect the patients." But fear was everywhere. The hospital ship had no weapons. It had no shields strong enough to survive. It was never built for battle, it was built for saving lives. And now it was being destroyed for that very reason. Another wave of fire hit. Corridors collapsed. Entire sections of the ship were torn away and thrown into the dark void. Hundreds of wounded men and women, too weak to move, vanished in an instant. On the alien bridge, the captain smiled. Pathetic. They thought their weakness was protection. The hospital ship tried to maneuver, its engines roaring weakly, but it was like a dove with broken wings, surrounded by wolves. Every attempt to escape was answered with more fire. Every cry for mercy was silenced by another explosion. Still, humans are stubborn. Even in despair, they resist. Captain Ward refused to leave her post. She shouted to her officers, "Move the children to the lower decks. Get the life pods ready." Her crew obeyed, tears in their eyes. They knew the truth. Escape was impossible. The aliens would not allow survivors. And indeed, the aliens had already planned their next move. They stopped firing, not out of mercy, but out of cruelty. Smaller attack craft launched from their warships, flying like black arrows toward the crippled human vessel. They wanted to board it, to steal supplies, to enslave survivors, to make a show of human suffering. Inside the hospital ship, the air grew thick with smoke. Fires raged through corridors. People coughed, choked, cried, prayed. Hope was breaking apart as fast as the ship itself. Captain Ward lowered her head, whispering to herself, "This is how we end. Slaughtered. Not for war, but for mercy." But deep within the ship, below the burning decks and broken corridors, there was a locked door. It had been locked since the ship launched. Most of the crew didn't even know it existed. Behind that door was a small lab. No windows, no noise, no light, except the glow of strange machines. And in that glow sat a man, calm while the world outside burned. His name was Dr. Adrian Cross. He was no soldier, no captain, but his name was whispered with fear across the stars. Once, long ago, the Galactic Council had banned his research. His inventions were too dangerous, too powerful, too uncontrollable. Even humanity had turned away from him. That was why he had hidden here, on a ship of peace, far from war. But the war had come to him. He heard the screams in the distance. He felt the shudder of explosions through the walls. He smelled the smoke creeping under his door. His eyes narrowed, and his hand trembled slightly. He whispered to himself, "They think this ship has no defense. They think mercy makes us weak." On the walls around him, diagrams of terrible machines hung like ghosts. Drones, weapons, algorithms, things no one had dared to build except him. He stood, slowly, as the ship shook again. His calm turned to steel. His eyes burned with something cold, something dangerous. "If they want to see weakness," he said softly, "then I will remind them why they once feared me." His hand moved to the console. He pressed a single button. The lab around him roared to life. Machines hummed. Lights flashed. The air itself seemed to change. The hospital ship might have been dying. But deep inside, something far deadlier than war had just awakened. And in that moment, the fate of the galaxy shifted. The hospital ship was still burning. Alarms echoed across its halls. Smoke spread like a living creature, crawling through every corridor. The screams of the wounded mixed with the roar of fire. Yet in one hidden place, deep inside the ship, there was silence until the machines began to wake. Dr. Adrian Cross stood in the middle of his secret lab, his eyes fixed on the glowing screens. His hands moved slowly, almost calmly, across the controls. For years he had promised himself never to touch these weapons again. For years he had buried his genius in the shadows, afraid of what it could do. But the aliens had made a mistake. They had attacked a ship of mercy. They had killed the helpless. And in doing so, they had awoken something far more dangerous than an army. Adrian was not like other men. His mind worked faster, sharper. While others saw machines, he saw living puzzles. While generals planned battles with fleets, Adrian designed wars with ideas. The Galactic Council had once called him a visionary. Then they had called him a monster. Both titles were true. He whispered to himself, "I gave them a chance to forget me. They should have left me buried." With a flick of his hand, he opened the first chamber. A hiss filled the room as the doors slid apart, revealing small black machines, spheres no bigger than fists, covered with tiny glowing veins of blue light. They floated into the air, humming softly like a swarm of bees. These were his creations, the nanite drones. Invisible to most sensors, faster than bullets, and hungry for commands, they were banned in every empire. Whole worlds could fall if Adrian chose to release them fully. He had sworn never to do so again. But now mercy was dead. The first drones drifted through the air vents of the ship. They spread like mist, unseen, silent. Out in the burning corridors, alien soldiers had already begun their boarding. They laughed as they marched, their heavy boots shaking the floor. They pushed aside wounded humans, dragging survivors into chains. One alien struck a nurse who tried to protect her patient, laughing as she fell. Then the laughter stopped. One alien grabbed his chest, choking. Another dropped his weapon as his arms stiffened. A third screamed, his eyes wide in terror, before collapsing without a mark on his skin. Within minutes, the boarding squad was gone, silent bodies lying in the smoke. The humans nearby stared in shock. They had not seen anything. No bullets, no blades, just death. Back in the lab, Adrian watched calmly. He did not smile, but his eyes hardened. "You came to feed on the helpless," he murmured. "But you only fed yourselves to me." The drones were only the beginning. Adrian turned to another console, his fingers moving faster now. Screens filled with streams of alien code, enemy ship signals, communication channels, weapon frequencies. His mind cut through them like a knife. In seconds, he was inside the aliens' network. On their command ship, the alien captain frowned as his screens flickered. "What is this?" he snapped. "Unknown interference, Captain," one officer replied nervously. "Something is inside our systems." "Block it!" the captain roared. But it was too late. Adrian's drones had already entered their ships, crawling unseen through the vents and circuits, whispering into engines and reactors. The great alien fleet, proud and strong, suddenly trembled as if gripped by an invisible hand. On the hospital ship, survivors began to notice. Through the windows, they saw alien ships outside flickering with strange lights. One cruiser suddenly tilted sideways, its engines shutting down. Another warship erupted in sparks as its shields collapsed. Captain Ward, still on the human bridge, stared in disbelief. What is happening? No one answered. They did not know that deep below them, one man was rewriting the battle. But not everyone was calm. Some of the crew had long whispered about Dr. Cross. They knew fragments of his story. They had heard the warnings. That he was dangerous, that he had been exiled, that he was not to be trusted. And now, those whispers returned as rumors spread across the surviving crew. Someone's fighting back. It's not us. We have no weapons. Then who? Down in the lab, Adrian kept working, his face lit by the glow of his machines. He knew what the crew would think of him. He knew they feared him as much as the aliens did. But fear was useful. Fear was a weapon. He whispered, almost to himself, "Let them fear me. Let them all fear me. If fear protects humanity, then I will carry it for them." The drones spread further, faster. Alien ships that had once circled the hospital vessel like wolves now turned against each other. One frigate's weapons suddenly locked onto its own flagship and fired. Another ship's engines overloaded, bursting into flame. The aliens panicked, shouting across their radios, but their voices were only static now. Adrian controlled everything. Inside the hospital ship, the chaos slowed. The wounded still cried, the fires still burned, but for the first time since the attack began, there was silence in the guns outside. People began to look at one another with confusion. Was this real? Were they saved? But Adrian knew this was only the beginning. He stood straighter, his hands steady on the console. His voice was cold, certain, as he gave the next command to his machines. Erase their fleet. Leave one ship alive. They must carry a message. The drones obeyed. And somewhere in the galaxy, far beyond the smoke and fire, the first whispers began to spread again. The deadly genius of humanity has returned. The hospital ship floated like a wounded animal in the void. Smoke trailed from its broken hull, its engines sputtered, and its decks burned with fire. Inside, survivors huddled in fear, unsure whether the next second would be their last. Yet, strangely, the alien guns had gone silent. No one on the bridge could understand why. The crew whispered in confusion. Captain Ward stared at the radar, watching the alien fleet outside break into chaos. One of their cruisers had already exploded without warning. Another drifted helplessly, its lights dying like a candle in the wind. "What is happening to them?" one officer whispered. "I don't know," Captain Ward admitted, her voice trembling. "But something is fighting for us." She didn't know it yet, but the answer was hidden deep below her feet. Inside a sealed lab where Dr. Adrian Cross had just crossed a line he had sworn never to cross again. Adrian's fingers flew over the controls. His eyes were calm, but inside, a storm raged. He had built these machines long ago, not for defense but for dominance. Nations had feared him. Empires had banned him. Humanity itself had cast him out. And yet, tonight, those same creations were the only thing standing between survival and extinction. The nanodrones he had released had already eaten into alien ships, spreading through circuits and flesh alike. But now Adrian opened the second chamber. A hiss of cold air escaped, and from the shadows rose his most dangerous design, the Oblivion Core. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was an artificial mind, forged to think faster than any being alive. It could rewrite code, control machines, and predict enemy moves before they made them. When combined with his drones, it was like giving a sword to a ghost, unstoppable and unseen. The core sphere glowed with a cold, blue light. The lab trembled as it came alive, connecting with the drones already in battle. Adrian's voice was low but commanding as he linked it into the system. You know what to do. The core answered with silence, but its work began instantly. On the alien command ship, panic spread. Officers shouted across broken comms. Screens flickered with static. Systems crashed without reason. Weapons locked onto their own allies. Report! The alien captain screamed, his voice full of rage. Something has invaded our systems, one officer cried. It knows every code, every channel. Captain, it's controlling us. Cut the engines. Shut everything down. We can't. It's faster than us. Then, before their eyes, their navigation screen lit up with a single message written in human standard. You attacked a hospital ship. Now you face me. The alien captain froze. His scales turned pale. He knew the stories. He had heard the name whispered in fear. And now he believed. Cross, he whispered. Meanwhile, inside the hospital ship, survivors watched in awe as alien vessels outside began to tear each other apart. One frigate fired its weapons blindly, striking its own fleet. Another ship drifted powerless before exploding into bright fire. The battlefield that once belonged to the aliens now looked cursed. On the bridge, Captain Ward gripped the edge of the console, her voice barely a whisper. This isn't possible. We didn't do this. Did we? Her crew exchanged nervous glances. Some wanted to believe Earth's fleet had arrived. But deep down they knew. Something or someone inside their own ship was fighting a war far beyond their understanding. And they were both saved by it and afraid of it. In his lab, Adrian Cross stood in the glow of his machines, his face hard as stone. He could hear the voices of the crew over the comms, their fear and confusion. He ignored them. His focus was on the aliens, on the monsters who had turned a ship of healing into a graveyard. He gave the core its next command. Spread the swarm. Take every ship except one. Leave them one survivor to carry the story. The drones obeyed instantly. Outside, the swarm moved like invisible lightning. Alien battleships that once ruled the stars now fell silent, their lights dying one by one. Crews screamed before being swallowed in silence. Engines melted into slag. Weapons turned against their own masters. From the hospital ship's windows, survivors watched with wide eyes as the galaxy's most feared fleet collapsed in minutes, without a single human weapon fired. It was not victory. It was something darker. For the first time, Captain Ward spoke what many feared. This isn't rescue, she whispered. This is vengeance. And she was right. Adrian Cross had not saved them out of duty or hope. He had unleashed his secret not to heal, but to punish. His mind was a storm, his machines the lightning. But punishment had a price. Even as the fleet burned, Adrian knew the truth. Once his machines were unleashed, they could not be hidden again. The galaxy would learn that the deadly genius of humanity still lived. His name would spread like fire, reaching every empire, every council, every throne. And they would all know humans were no longer weak. In that moment, Adrian didn't care. His eyes were cold, his voice quiet as he watched the last alien ship drift away, carrying the story of their slaughter. Go, he whispered. Tell them. Tell the galaxy what happens when you touch what is mine. The survivors aboard the hospital ship wept, not just with relief but with fear. They were alive, but they had seen something terrifying rise from their own people. And as the fires dimmed and the silence of space returned, one truth was clear. The galaxy had not just witnessed a battle. It had witnessed the rebirth of a legend. The battlefield was unrecognizable. Only minutes earlier, the alien fleet had circled the hospital ship like hunters closing in on prey. Now they were burning wrecks, drifting corpses of metal and fire. The blackness of space glowed with scattered explosions, torn engines, and lifeless warships. And at the center of it all, the hospital ship still floated scarred, broken, bleeding smoke, yet alive. Inside, silence gripped the survivors. They had felt certain of death. They had prepared for it. Yet here they were, still breathing. Children clutched their mothers. Soldiers looked at one another with wide eyes, and doctors wiped tears from their faces. Relief filled the air, but so did fear, because no one understood how they had been saved. On the bridge, Captain Ward stood staring at the wreckage through the main window. Her hands trembled on the railing. She had watched fleets fight before, but never like this. "They destroyed themselves," she whispered. "No, someone destroyed them." Her officers said nothing. They didn't dare. Deep in the sealed lab, Dr. Adrian Cross stood in the glow of his machines. His eyes were fixed on the monitors showing alien ships crumbling one after another. His creations obeyed without hesitation, hunting down enemies with precision no army could match. But even as he watched, his mind was not calm. There was no joy in his face, no pride in his posture. Only a cold focus, like a man who had once walked this path and knew its price. He whispered to himself, this was not rescue, this was punishment. The Oblivion core pulsed faintly behind him, its light steady, almost alive. The nanodrones still swarmed unseen, crawling through what remained of the alien fleet. But Adrian had pulled them back now, holding them like a wolf held by its chain. One more command and the chain would break again. On the alien side, only one ship still lived. Engines sputtering, shields broken. It limped away into the dark. The crew inside trembled as they sent desperate reports back to their empire. They carried no victory, no trophies, only terror. And one single message burned into their systems, impossible to erase. Humanity is not weak. Remember my name, Adrian Cross. For the aliens, it was not just defeat. It was humiliation. Their strongest fleet had been undone not by armies, not by fleets, but by one man hidden inside a hospital ship. Fear spread faster than fire. Meanwhile, survivors aboard the human vessel began whispering. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a curse. A wounded soldier, lying on his stretcher, asked, "How did we survive?" A nurse shook her head. "We didn't. Something else. Something darker survived for us." Captain Ward could feel it too. Her instincts told her the truth. Somewhere in her ship, something unnatural had moved against the aliens. It had saved them, yes, but the way the aliens died was not human. It was too clean, too fast, too merciless. She looked at her officers and made a quiet decision. "Find out what is hidden in this ship," she ordered. The turning point was not only in the battle, it was in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. The survivors began to see humanity differently. They had always believed Earth was strong, but vulnerable. Now, they realized strength could come in another form, not fleets, not weapons, but minds like Adrian's. Minds that could reshape wars with a single command. The galaxy, too, would soon see it. Across distant worlds, the story of the hospital ship would spread. Some would call Adrian Cross a savior. Others would call him a monster. But no one would deny the truth. Humanity was no longer weak. Yet, even as hope grew among survivors, fear grew just as fast. Down in the lab, Adrian shut down part of his system. The drones returned, silent and waiting, like predators leashed. But he knew the truth. There was no going back now. The moment he had pressed that first button, his secret had been unleashed again. The Council would know. The empires would know. Every enemy humanity had would know. And they would all come for him. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes heavy with memory. He remembered the last time he had used these machines years ago. Whole fleets had fallen then, too. Humanity had survived, but at the cost of its trust in him. That was why they had buried his name, locked away his research, and sent him into exile. And now history would repeat. On the bridge, Captain Ward finally broke her silence. She turned to her crew, her voice steady. "We survived tonight, but survival has a cost. Someone or something has awakened on this ship, and it is not finished yet." Her words hung in the air like a shadow, because everyone knew the truth. This was no ordinary victory. This was a warning. The galaxy had reached a turning point. Far beyond the wreckage, as the lone alien ship limped home, whispers already began to ripple through enemy space. Commanders shouted. Councils argued. Priests prayed. They had thought humans were children of the stars, fragile and new. But tonight proved otherwise. One man had shown them all that the smallest spark could set the whole galaxy on fire. And in the ashes, only one name remained: Adrian Cross. The smoke of battle still clung to the stars. Wreckage from alien ships drifted in silence, glowing faintly as fire slowly died in the vacuum. The hospital ship remained in the center, scarred but alive. Its hull looked like a wounded survivor, broken, bent, yet unyielding. Inside, survivors whispered to each other, their voices trembling with both relief and fear. They had been saved from certain death. But the way it had happened was unnatural, terrifying. No fleet had come to rescue them. No miracle had appeared from the stars. Instead, the enemy fleet had simply collapsed, destroyed by an invisible force. No one wanted to say it aloud, but every survivor felt it. Something inside their ship had done this. On the bridge, Captain Ward kept her eyes fixed on the dark window where stars burned beyond the wreckage. She didn't speak, but her mind raced. She had fought in wars. She had seen weapons of mass destruction. But nothing looked like this. One officer finally broke the silence. "Captain, should we send a signal to Earth?" Ward's jaw tightened. "Not yet. If we speak too soon, the whole galaxy will hear us. And I don't know if what saved us tonight is something we want the galaxy to know about." But the galaxy already knew. The alien fleet's lone survivor had reached their home world. Their captain, broken and trembling, stood before his emperor and described the horror. Ships turning on each other. Crews dying without wounds. Systems obeying an unseen hand. And one name glowing across their screens: Adrian Cross. The emperor's face turned pale. He had heard the legends. The deadly genius of humanity. The man who could command machines like gods commanded storms. They had believed him gone, erased, forgotten. But now he was back. Fear spread quickly through the alien empire. Commanders argued in panic. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others whispered that no retaliation could succeed. Priests warned their people that a new shadow had risen. Traders carried the story to other stars, selling it for profit. And soon, every world began to whisper the same words: humanity has awakened its monster. Across the galaxy, reactions were swift. In distant councils, alien leaders argued furiously. "If he lives, no empire is safe," one shouted. "He destroyed an entire fleet with nothing but his mind," another added. "Then humanity must be destroyed before he grows stronger." But not all agreed. Some leaders leaned forward, their eyes sharp with calculation. "No," they said quietly. "We must not destroy humanity. We must use them. A weapon like Cross could rule the stars. Better to have him as an ally than an enemy." Thus, fear split into two paths: those who wanted him destroyed, and those who secretly dreamed of controlling him. On Earth, news of the hospital ship's survival reached military command. Relief quickly turned into unease when reports described what had happened. At first, commanders refused to believe it. But when survivors repeated the same story, the fleet falling without human weapons, the truth became impossible to deny. One general clenched his fists. Cross. He was supposed to be gone. He was supposed to be buried forever. Another voice whispered, "If he's back, maybe it's not a curse. Maybe it's the shield humanity has been waiting for." The debate began there, too. Was Adrian Cross humanity's savior, or its doom? Meanwhile, aboard the hospital ship, survivors walked the halls in silence. They avoided speaking of what they had seen. Some prayed, thanking God for sending a protector. Others shivered, certain they had only traded death for something darker. One mother held her child and whispered, "He saved us," but her eyes filled with fear as she added, "But what if he saved us only to show the galaxy how dangerous we are?" Even the wounded soldiers were divided. Some spoke with pride, saying, "Humanity is no longer prey. The galaxy will fear us now." Others shook their heads, replying, "Fear does not bring safety. Fear brings war." And in the quiet lab below, Adrian Cross listened. His machines recorded every whisper on the ship, every cry, every prayer. He heard their fear, their doubt, their hope. His face remained calm, but inside, a weight pressed on him. He had not wanted this. He had wanted peace, silence, anonymity. But once again, his genius had turned him into a weapon. And now the galaxy knew. He whispered to himself, "Fear spreads faster than truth. By tomorrow, they won't remember the hospital ship. They will only remember my name." The Oblivion core pulsed gently beside him, almost as if it agreed. The drones hovered in silence, waiting for his next order. He could unleash them again. He could silence the whispers before they grew. But he did nothing. Because deep down, Adrian knew this was only the beginning. Far away, in the chambers of the Galactic Council, one ancient alien leaned forward, his voice shaking as he spoke to the others. "You all laugh at humans. You call them weak, foolish, young. But mark my words, one human has just changed the fate of the stars. And he did it alone." The chamber fell into silence. Every empire now faced the same truth. Humanity was no longer just another species in the galaxy. It was a threat. And behind that threat was one man, Adrian Cross. The hospital ship floated in silence. Fires had been put out, survivors moved into safer sections, and wounded were being treated as best as possible. Yet no one truly rested. Fear still walked the halls, heavier than smoke, heavier than death. Everyone knew their savior was still somewhere inside the ship. But no one dared to thank him, because the man who had saved them was also the man who terrified the stars. In the sealed lab, Dr. Adrian Cross sat in the glow of his machines. The Oblivion core pulsed like a heart of cold fire, and the drones hovered in quiet obedience. He stared at them, silent, his face unreadable. He had saved the ship, yes, but he had also unleashed a shadow over humanity. The galaxy now whispered his name with fear. Some would run from it, others would seek to kill him, and still others would try to control him. Adrian understood this better than anyone. Once unleashed, fear spreads like a plague. He closed his eyes and whispered, "What have I done?" On the bridge above, Captain Ward gathered her officers. They had repaired the comm systems and finally received signals from Earth. The generals demanded reports, asking for explanations, demanding to know who had destroyed the alien fleet. Ward hesitated. She could not tell them the truth, not yet. Not until she knew where Adrian stood. Was he a shield, or a sword pointed at humanity itself? She dismissed the officers and stood alone by the window, staring into the stars. Finally, she made her choice. She would find him. Hours later, the heavy doors of the hidden lab hissed open. Smoke from damaged corridors drifted in, mixing with the glow of machines. Captain Ward stepped inside, her boots echoing softly on the metal floor. There he was, Adrian Cross. Calm, still, surrounded by his creations like a king on a throne of shadows. His eyes lifted to meet hers, sharp and cold. "You shouldn't be here," he said simply. Ward's voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "I had to see you. I had to see the man who destroyed a fleet with a whisper." Adrian looked back at his drones. "I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I only gave them the chance." "Don't play with words," Ward snapped. "You chose to unleash this power, and now the whole galaxy fears us. Fears you." Silence hung between them. Finally, Adrian asked, "Do you fear me too, Captain?" Ward hesitated. She remembered the screams of her people, the children who would have died without him. She remembered the aliens burning in silence, their ships torn apart like toys. She remembered the message, his name written like fire across enemy systems. "Yes," she admitted. "I fear you, but I also know I owe you everything." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Fear and gratitude, that is always the balance, isn't it? They thank me, then they bury me. They cheer for survival, then they curse the price." Ward stepped closer. "So what will you do now? Keep hiding? Keep unleashing these monsters every time someone attacks? Or will you finally choose who you are? His eyes narrowed. Choose. Yes, she said firmly. You can choose to be a shield for humanity, for the innocent, or you can choose to be what the galaxy already believes you are, a monster. Adrian turned his gaze to the Oblivion core, its light reflecting in his eyes. His machines hummed quietly, waiting for his command. The choice she spoke of was real. If he let the core spread further, his drones could consume whole fleets, whole worlds. He could become the nightmare every empire feared. Or he could hold them back. Use them only when no other hope remained. Become not the monster, but the shadow that kept monsters away. Outside the lab, whispers spread through the crew. Some wanted him gone, fearing what he might do next. Others argued he should be protected, even honored, because without him they would all be dead. The ship was divided, hearts torn between hope and dread. And far beyond, in the halls of alien rulers, choices were also being made. Some empires prepared weapons, plotting his assassination. Others sent spies, hoping to lure him with promises of power. And the Galactic Council met in secret, debating whether humanity itself should now be quarantined, isolated from the stars because of one man. The galaxy trembled not at Earth's armies, but at Adrian Cross's choice. Finally, he stood. The drones shifted as if sensing his movement. Captain Ward tensed, unsure of what he would do. Adrian placed his hand on the console. His voice was quiet but strong. I will not be their monster, but I will not be their slave either. If they come for us again, I will answer. Until then, I will wait. Ward studied him. She wasn't sure if his words gave comfort or warning. Perhaps both. As she left the lab, Adrian turned back to the core. Alone again, he whispered to himself. The galaxy believes it knows fear, but it has never truly seen it. Not yet. The drones pulsed softly in the dim light, like wolves at rest. The choice had been made. But choices have consequences. And soon, the galaxy would feel them. The hospital ship drifted quietly now, far from the battlefield. The fires inside had been put out, the wounded were treated as best as possible, and the dead had been honored in silence. On the surface, it seemed as if peace had returned. But beneath the calm, everyone knew the truth. Peace was only an illusion. Something far greater had begun. News of the massacre spread like fire across the stars. The story of one hospital ship defeating an entire alien fleet reached every world, every port, every council. Some dismissed it at first, calling it lies or human propaganda. But soon survivors from the alien side arrived with the same story. They told of ships turning against themselves, of soldiers dying without wounds, of a single human name glowing across their systems. Adrian Cross. The galaxy had thought humanity was young, weak, and harmless. Now they whispered a different story. Humanity had a shadow. Humanity had a weapon unlike any other. Fear spread faster than truth. In the alien empires, panic reigned. Generals spoke of launching new fleets to crush humanity before the deadly genius could strike again. Priests declared that Adrian was a demon born of Earth. Traders raised their prices when dealing with humans, afraid of provoking them. Even the most powerful rulers trembled when they thought of him. Yet not all saw fear. Some saw opportunity. Spies whispered of sending secret offers to Earth. Alliances, pacts, promises of power. If only Adrian Cross could be convinced to stand with them. Thus, the galaxy divided itself once more. Some prepared for war. Some prepared for bargains. All prepared for chaos. On Earth, the news reached the highest levels of command. The generals argued day and night. He is too dangerous, one shouted. If the galaxy fears him, then they will turn against us all. Another answered, he is our shield. Without him, the hospital ship would be dust. Perhaps humanity has finally found the weapon it needs to survive. And so Earth too was divided. Was Adrian a curse? Or was he their salvation? But aboard the hospital ship, the man at the center of it all sat in silence. In his hidden lab, Adrian Cross stared at the Oblivion core. His cold blue light pulsed like a heartbeat. The drones floated quietly around him, waiting for his command. His machines were ready. With a single word, he could end fleets, topple empires, rewrite the balance of power in the galaxy. And yet, his heart was heavy. He had not asked for this war. He had not asked to be humanity's shield or its monster. He only wanted to be forgotten, to live far from the stars' politics and hatred. But fate had pulled him back. His genius, once buried, now burned brighter than ever. He whispered to himself, "They will not let me rest. Not now. Not ever." Captain Ward entered quietly, her uniform marked with ash, her eyes still tired but strong. She stood beside him, watching the glow of the core. "The council will come," she said softly. "The aliens will come. Even Earth will come. They all want the same thing, to decide what you are. Savior or destroyer." Adrian did not look at her. His voice was calm. "And what do you think I am, Captain?" Ward hesitated. She remembered the cries of her people, the fire in the corridors, the hopelessness before he acted. She remembered the silence afterward, the terrifying, absolute silence of a fleet erased. "You are both," she said at last. "You are the sword and the shield. And the galaxy has never feared both in one hand before." Outside the ship, stars burned quietly. But everyone who looked at them now saw something different. They were no longer just lights in the dark. They were possible battlefields, possible graves, possible thrones. The fate of the galaxy had shifted, and no one could deny it. The next day, the hospital ship finally rejoined the human fleet. Soldiers cheered when they saw it alive, but their cheers fell silent when they learned the truth. Some looked at Adrian with awe, others with dread. A child who had survived the attack clutched his mother and whispered, "That man saved us." His mother pulled him close, her eyes dark with fear. "Yes," she whispered, "but he also saved us in a way that will make the galaxy hate us." Far away, alien scouts sent reports. Entire worlds began fortifying their defenses. Armies trained harder. Councils whispered of war. The galaxy was no longer balanced. It now revolved around one question: what will Adrian Cross do next? And in his lab, Adrian finally stood. He placed his hand on the core, feeling its cold hum. His voice was soft but carried the weight of fate. "I will not start this war," he said. "But if they bring it to us again, then the galaxy will remember why they feared me." The drones pulsed with silent light, like predators waiting in the dark. And so it was decided. The fate of the galaxy no longer belonged to empires or councils or fleets. It belonged to a man, a deadly genius, a human,